All right, everyone, get ready because today we are taking a deep dive into simulation theory. And wow, have you given us a lot to work with? I mean, we've got everything here from philosophy papers and physics articles to even some pop culture references just for fun. But really, our mission today is to uncover what people are saying about whether we're living in a simulation and look at what evidence exists for this wild concept. So get ready for some aha moments because this is where things get really interesting.
It really is fascinating, this whole idea that we could be living in a simulation,
hmm
because it actually goes way back. We're not just talking about something from a modern sci-fi movie.
Yeah, exactly. It's wild to me that we're dealing with concepts that go back centuries. I mean, we're talking Bishop Berkeley in the 1700s and his concept of subjective idealism, the idea that reality only exists in our minds. It really throws a wrench into how we usually think about the world.
And what's really interesting is how Berkeley's ideas went against the scientific views of his time. Like Newton, for example, believed in absolute space and time, existing independently of any observer. But Berkeley argued that our perception of space and time is relative to the observer, which is an idea that actually foreshadowed Einstein's theories of relativity centuries later.
So does that mean reality is subjective? Or is there some objective truth out there beyond our individual perceptions? Like, where does this leave us in the simulation theory debate?
Well, it gives us a philosophical foundation, one that lets us question the very nature of reality. So if reality is subjective, like Berkeley suggests, then the idea of it being a simulation
Yeah.
becomes much more plausible. That it's not so crazy to think that our experiences could be created by some outside system, shaping our perceptions of the world.
Okay, so we have this philosophical foundation, but what about the more technical side of simulation theory? A lot of what we're looking at talks about computer simulations and how they always leave behind some kind of artifact, almost like a fingerprint of the system running things.
Like imagine you're a character in a video game. No matter how real that game world feels, you can only move so fast. There's a speed limit set by the game's processor. And even though that speed limit is artificial, it would feel very real to you as the character.
So some scientists think that the speed of light might be our universe's version of that speed limit, that we can't go faster than it because of some fundamental constraint of the simulation we're in. Whoa, that is a wild thought. But if the speed of light is just an artifact, what does that mean for how we understand physics? Could there be a whole other area of physics beyond that simulated speed limit?
Oh, it definitely opens up some exciting possibilities. But we have to be careful about jumping to conclusions. The speed of light analogy is interesting,
Hmm.
but it's just one way of looking at things. There could be other explanations for why the speed of light is what it is.
Of course, it's super important to stay open-minded and consider all sides. Which brings us to another layer of this simulation theory onion, the role of consciousness.
Right, and this is where things get really interesting. A lot of the sources you gave us dive into the idea that consciousness might not just be a side effect of a complex brain, but maybe something much more fundamental to the very fabric of reality itself.
Yeah, some of the sources even suggest that consciousness could be shaping the reality we experience, not just observing it, kind of like a programmer setting the rules of a virtual world. Could our consciousness be the programmer in a way?
That's a really compelling thought. Think about the advances we see in technology, especially with video games. We have haptic feedback now, where players feel sensations that mirror what their character is feeling. It's blurring the lines between the player and the character more and more.
So are we moving towards a future where we can't even tell the difference between a simulation and real life? What if our consciousness is already experiencing some kind of primary simulation? And there's another entity running a meta simulation, a level above ours with controls and information we can't even imagine.
That's the mind-blowing idea of nested simulations. And it brings up some really deep questions. If our reality is just one level in a bunch of simulations, what does that mean for free will? Is our sense of choice just an illusion?
Wow, this is getting pretty deep. What if the simulators of our reality are also simulated beings? And it just keeps going, creating an endless chain of realities. This is starting to sound like a sci-fi novel, so where do we go from here?
That's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
And we're really just scratching the surface. So as you've been going through all these sources, what stood out to you the most?
Honestly, the thing that's really messing with my head is that consciousness could be the force behind reality. It's like we're all mini gods creating our own little universes.
That is a powerful way to think about it. And it connects to some really interesting research you found. The work of scientists who were actually looking for hard evidence that we're living in a simulation. So we're not just talking philosophy anymore. There are experiments happening.
Yeah. One of the sources talks about Nick Bostrom's 2003 paper. It makes a statistical argument that's hard to ignore. He says, if advanced civilizations can make realistic simulations, and they have a reason to do so, then it's statistically more likely that we're in one of those simulations than that we're the original, non-simulated civilization.
It's a probability argument, and it depends on the assumption that civilizations capable of creating those simulations are common. And if that's true, then yeah, the odds do seem to point towards us being in a simulation. But remember, it's based on probabilities, not definite proof. We can't say for sure without stronger evidence.
You're right, you're right. But some scientists are taking Bostrom's ideas seriously enough to design experiments to actually test the simulation hypothesis. It's like they're looking for glitches in the matrix.
Exactly. And you know, one of the sources you shared talks about Silas Bean and his fascinating idea. He says we should look for tiny weird things in the behavior of cosmic rays. You know, those high-energy particles that are always hitting Earth from space. And his thinking is that if reality is a simulation, there might be a limit to the resolution of space-time, just like how images on a computer are made of pixels.
So, just like in a video game, when a character runs into an invisible wall at the edge of the map, maybe cosmic rays would do something weird. If they hit the edge of our simulated reality, are scientists actually seeing anything like that?
Well, it's really early days, but there are research projects trying to detect these weird things. And another approach, which was mentioned in one of your sources, is being led by Tom Campbell.
Hmm.
And he's doing experiments in quantum physics to see if the act of observing something can actually change what happens.
Wait, are you saying he's suggesting that our reality might be like a video game where the environment only renders in detail when we look at it?
Yeah, that's the basic idea. Campbell's work is based on the idea that if we're in a simulation, maybe the simulators are using shortcuts to save computing power, so they don't render the whole universe in detail until someone is looking at it.
It's like those old video games where things in the distance were blurry until you got closer and they suddenly became clear. That's amazing. But what about the people who don't buy into this whole simulation thing? Are there good arguments against it?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most outspoken critics is Michael Biercock, the physicist.
Okay.
And he says that while the simulation hypothesis is a fun thought experiment, it's not really testable with the scientific methods we have now. He thinks we should stick to the traditional scientific method and focus on things we can test with experiments and evidence.
Yeah, he's got a point there. We can't abandon the core of science just to chase an idea that might be impossible to prove.
Biercock's skepticism shows how important it is to be rigorous and cautious when we're dealing with extraordinary claims. But even if we can't definitively prove or disprove the simulation hypothesis, there's another argument against it that's really thought-provoking. One of your sources features Donald Hoffman, a cognitive scientist, and he brings an evolutionary perspective to the table.
Interesting. What does evolution have to do with whether we're in a simulation or not?
Well, Hoffman argues that evolution might not favor us seeing reality as it truly is. Instead, it might favor perceptions that help us survive, even if those perceptions aren't accurate.
So you're saying our senses might be giving us a simplified version of reality, one that's designed to keep us alive and reproducing, but not necessarily the full picture. It's like we're all wearing VR headsets that filter out the complicated parts of the real world.
Exactly. Hoffman says our perception of reality might be like the icons on your computer desktop. They represent complex programs and data, but they're made to be simple and easy to use. We don't need to know the code to interact with them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But it's kind of unsettling, too. What we see as real could be very different from what's actually there.
It really challenges how we think about what it means to know something. And it brings up a huge question. If our senses are designed to show us a simplified version of reality, optimized for survival, what is the true nature of reality really like? And could we even understand it if we saw it?
Whoa, that is a lot to unpack. It feels like we've been thrown into the deep end of the philosophy pool.
It definitely is. But even if we can't prove or disprove the simulation hypothesis right now, just thinking about these possibilities is valuable. It makes us examine our assumptions about reality and consciousness and the nature of knowledge itself.
It's like we took the red pill, just like Neo in The Matrix, and we're starting to see the world in a totally new way. But let's step back for a second. Even if we're not in an actual computer simulation, the concept of the Matrix can still apply to our lives. In a metaphorical way, right?
Definitely. Think about all the systems that shape how we see things and think. Social conditioning, cultural norms, political ideologies, even the algorithms that control what we see online. These systems, while they might not be intentionally bad, can create a kind of matrix that limits how we understand the world and shapes our behavior in ways we might not even realize.
So even if it's not a literal computer program, we're still kind of plugged into a system, surrounded by these invisible forces that control our thoughts and actions, often without us even knowing.
It's a powerful way to think about the influence of social structures. But here's the good news. Even if we're in this metaphorical matrix, we're not totally helpless. We can become aware of these influences and question them and challenge them.
It's like waking up from a dream and realizing we can choose how we respond to the world around us. That's actually really empowering. But how do we actually do that? How do we break free from these invisible systems?
The sources mentioned some ways to unplug from the matrix. They did, yeah. And the most important thing is to develop critical thinking skills. That means questioning everything, not just accepting information as fact and seeking out different points of view. It's also crucial to be aware of our own biases, those preconceived notions and assumptions we have, that color how we see the world.
So it's about becoming more mindful, more aware of the things that are shaping our thoughts and behavior. It's about taking back control of our own minds, right?
Right.
But let's not forget that there could be downsides to messing with the matrix. What if trying to break free actually backfires?
That's a good point. The sources do warn us not to rush into anything drastic without thinking about the consequences. If we mess with a system we don't understand, we could create chaos or even hurt people.
You know, it's like that old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Or maybe in this case, it's more like, if you don't know how it works, don't try to reprogram it.
Exactly. But that doesn't mean we should just passively accept things as they are. The key is to find a balance between thinking critically and acting cautiously. We need to be informed and aware and choose our battles carefully.
Okay, so we've covered the philosophy behind simulation theory. We've looked at the scientific evidence, or lack of it, and even thought about what it means for our everyday lives. What else is there to unpack in this crazy world of ideas?
Well, let's move into the realm of cosmology, the study of the universe as a whole. It might seem like a jump, but it actually ties into our exploration of simulation theory. Because if reality is a simulation, then the universe we see might not be what it seems.
Okay, I'm listening. Tell me more about this cosmic connection.
So think about this. What we know about cosmology now points to a few possible ways the universe could end. One scenario is the Big Freeze, where the universe gradually cools down and expands until everything is so spread out and energy is so dispersed that no new stars can form, and even black holes eventually disappear.
So the universe just kind of fizzles out, becomes cold and dark and empty. That's a pretty depressing picture.
It is, unless you think about it through the lens of simulation theory. What if the Big Freeze isn't a natural ending, but a feature of the simulation?
Hold on, are you saying the simulators might have programmed the universe to end? But why would they do that?
Think about it from a practical point of view. Running a simulation as big and complex as our universe would take a massive amount of computing power. So at some point, the simulators might decide to shut it down, to save resources, or to move on to other projects.
So the Big Freeze could be like a universal system shutdown. That's mind-blowing. But what about the other way the universe could end? The Big Crunch. That's where the universe stops expanding and starts collapsing back in on itself, right?
Right, in that scenario, gravity eventually overpowers the expansion, and everything gets pulled back together into a super dense point, like the Big Bang in reverse. And this raises some even more interesting questions about the simulation.
Like what happens to the simulation if the universe collapses back into a single point? Does it just end?
That's one possibility. Or maybe that single point is where the simulation gets transferred to a new system. So it can keep evolving in a different environment. It's like hitting the reset button on a computer program, but on a cosmic scale.
So we could be reborn into a brand new universe with different laws of physics, a different history, maybe even different fundamental constants.
It's a crazy concept, but it's not impossible if you think about it within the framework of simulation theory.
This whole conversation is giving me serious existential vertigo. We went from questioning reality to thinking about the end of the universe. As a sign that the simulation is shutting down, I need a minute to process all this.
Take your time. It's a lot to take in. And we're not done yet.
Okay, I think I'm back with you. So we've been talking about some pretty intense stuff. The end of the universe, these potential system shutdowns, even the idea of being reborn into a new simulated universe. It's a lot to wrap my head around.
It really does stretch the imagination, doesn't it? But even if it sounds like sci-fi, it all comes back to a fundamental question at the core of simulation theory. If our reality is a simulation, how much control do we really have over our destiny? Are we just characters in some cosmic video game? at the mercy of the programmers.
That's the question that keeps coming back to me. It's kind of unsettling to think that our choices, actions, even our thoughts could be predetermined, or at least limited by the rules of the simulation. Do we have any free will at all in this scenario?
It's a question that's got philosophers and scientists debating. Some say that even in a simulated reality, there's still room for free will. I mean, think about video game characters. They make choices within the rules of the game, and those choices feel meaningful to them, even though they're operating within a set system.
So maybe we have some kind of limited free will, like the freedom to choose what we eat or our career path, but the big stuff, like the laws of physics or the overall story of our lives, might be set by the simulators.
It's definitely possible. But here's where things get even more complicated and even more mind-blowing. Remember our talk about nested simulations. If our reality is just one level in a whole hierarchy of simulations, each with its own rules and level of control, it makes you wonder if there's a hierarchy of agency too.
Wait, so you're saying that the simulators who made our reality might also be simulated beings living in a simulation created by even more advanced entities, and it just keeps going up and up, like a cosmic set of Russian nesting dolls, but with levels of reality instead of wooden figures.
Exactly. And if there is this hierarchy of simulations, it makes sense that there would be a corresponding hierarchy of control. Maybe the simulators on the lower levels have more freedom than us, while the ones higher up have even more control over the whole system.
So it's like a chain of command.
Yeah.
With the ultimate programmers at the top, making all the decisions and influencing everything below, which leads to a crazy question. What if we could break out of our simulation and reach those higher levels?
Now we're getting into pure sci-fi territory. But it's a question that's captured a lot of imaginations. Some theorists actually believe it might be possible to escape the simulation.
But how? Do we need to find some secret code in the fabric of reality? Or build a supercomputer to hack the system?
There are a few different ideas out there. Some researchers are trying to find those glitches in the matrix, those anomalies that hint at the structure of the simulation. They think if we can find these glitches and figure out how they work, we might be able to use them to break free.
It's like finding a backdoor in a computer program, a way to get to the source code and change the rules of the game. What about other approaches?
Well, some people are exploring the idea of manipulating consciousness itself, hacking the simulation from the inside out, so to speak. They believe that if consciousness is fundamental to reality, like we've talked about, then mastering consciousness might be the key to unlocking the simulation's secrets and transcending its limitations.
That's a pretty radical concept. It suggests we could become like gods, able to reshape reality however we want.
It's definitely a powerful idea. But we have to remember that even if we could break out of the simulation, it might not be a good idea. The sources we've looked at warn about the dangers of messing with a system we don't understand.
Yeah, that makes sense. With great power comes great responsibility. What if trying to break free makes the simulation collapse? Or what if we unleash something we can't control and hurt ourselves or others?
Exactly. And there are ethical questions too. Do we have the right to mess with the simulation? Especially if there are other beings inside it. What we do could have consequences we don't foresee and cause harm to who knows how many others.
That's a sobering thought. Maybe it's better to focus on understanding the simulation and our place in it,
Yeah.
rather than trying to escape.
Perhaps. Or maybe the journey is more important than the destination. Just the act of thinking about these ideas, questioning our assumptions about reality and consciousness, can be transformative in itself.
This whole deep dive has been a wild ride. We've gone from exploring subjective reality to thinking about the end of the universe and the dangers of messing with the simulation. It's a lot to take in.
It really is.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing to remember is that even if we can't prove or disprove the simulation hypothesis, just thinking about it can change how we see the world. It can make us more aware of our own biases, more critical of the information we take in, and more open to different perspectives.
It's like we've been given a peek behind the curtain, a glimpse into the workings of the universe. Even if we don't fully understand it yet, it's an incredible and humbling experience.
I agree. And in the end, whether or not we're in a simulation, it's the journey of exploration and discovery that truly matters. That's what makes us human, what drives us to seek understanding and push the limits of what we know.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into simulation theory.
It's been a pleasure joining you on this thought-provoking adventure. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and never stop wondering about the nature of your own reality.
And who knows, maybe someday we'll have definitive proof about whether we're in a simulation or not. Or maybe the mystery will keep inspiring us for generations to come. Either way, it's a reminder of how much we still have to learn about the universe and our place in it. Okay, yeah, I think I've had a minute to catch my breath. We've been talking about some really heavy stuff here. The end of the universe, possible system shutdowns, even being reborn into a new simulated universe. My brain is doing backflips trying to keep up.
It's a lot to process, for sure.
Yeah.
But even if these scenarios sound like something out of a movie, it all comes back to this central question about simulation theory. If this is all a simulation, how much control do we really have? Are we basically just characters in a game being controlled by someone else?
Yeah, that's the thing that's been bugging me this whole time. It's kind of scary to think that maybe our choices don't really matter, that our actions, our thoughts, are all just pre-programmed or at least limited by the rules of the simulation. Like, do we have any free will at all in this situation?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's got everyone debating. Philosophers, scientists, everyone. Some people say even in a simulated world, there's still room for free will. Think of it like this. The characters in a video game. They can make choices within the game's rules, right? And to them, those choices feel real and important, even if they're ultimately stuck inside a system.
So maybe we have a limited version of free will, like we can choose what we eat or what job we do, but the bigger things, the laws of physics, the overall direction of our lives, maybe those are set by the simulators.
It's definitely a possibility. But hold on, because this is where things get even more mind-bending. Remember we talked about nested simulations? What if our reality is just one level in a whole bunch of simulations, each with its own set of rules and its own level of control? That makes you wonder, is there also a hierarchy of free will?
Wait, are you saying the simulators who created our reality could also be simulated beings themselves, living in a simulation created by something even more advanced, and it just keeps going up and up, like those Russian nesting dolls, but with different levels of reality?
Exactly. And if there is this hierarchy of simulations, it makes sense that there would be a hierarchy of control too. Maybe the simulators at lower levels have more freedom than us, and the ones at higher levels have even more control over everything.
You're like a chain of command, with the ultimate programmers at the very top, calling all the shots and controlling everything below.
Which brings up a crazy question. What if we could somehow escape our simulation and reach those higher levels?
Now we're really venturing into science fiction.
Hmm.
But a lot of people are fascinated by that idea. Some theorists actually believe that escaping the simulation might be possible.
But how? Would we need to find some hidden code in the universe, or build a supercomputer to hack into the system?
There are a few different schools of thought on this. Some researchers are focused on finding those glitches in the matrix, the anomalies that might reveal how the simulation works. They believe if we can understand those glitches, we could exploit them to break free.
So like finding a backdoor in a computer program, a way to get to the source code and rewrite the rules. Are there other approaches?
Others are looking into manipulating consciousness itself, basically hacking the simulation from within. They believe that if consciousness is the key to reality, like some of our sources suggested, then mastering consciousness might be the way to unlock the simulation and go beyond its limits.
That's a pretty intense concept. It's like saying we could become godlike and reshape reality however we want.
It's a powerful idea for sure.
Right.
But remember, even if we could break out, it might not be a good thing. We've seen warnings in our sources about the dangers of messing with a system we don't fully understand.
Right, like with great power comes great responsibility. What if we screw things up and make the whole simulation collapse or unleash something we can't control and cause a lot of damage?
Exactly. And there's the ethical side too. Do we have the right to interfere with a simulation? Especially if there are other conscious beings living in it, our actions could have huge unintended consequences and hurt countless others.
Yeah, that's something to think about. Maybe it's smarter to focus on understanding the simulation and our role in it, instead of trying to escape.
Maybe. Or maybe the journey of exploration is what matters most. Just the act of thinking about these ideas, challenging our assumptions about reality and consciousness, can change us in a profound way.
This whole deep dive has been a wild ride. We've explored the philosophy behind subjective reality, considered the possibility of the simulation shutting down, and even discussed the dangers of tampering with it.
It's been quite a journey. But I think the most important takeaway from all of this is that even if we can't prove or disprove the simulation theory, just considering it can change how we see the world. It can make us more aware of our own biases, more critical of the information we encounter, and more open to different viewpoints.
It's like we've been given a glimpse behind the scenes, a peek into the machinery of the universe. Even if we don't fully understand how it all works yet, the experience is both amazing and humbling.
I agree. And at the end of the day, whether we're living in a simulation or not, the journey of exploration and discovery is what truly matters. It's what makes us human. It drives us to seek knowledge and push the boundaries of what we know.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the incredible world of simulation theory.
Thank you for joining us on this thought-provoking adventure. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and never stop wondering about reality.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll finally know for sure if we're in a simulation, or maybe this mystery will keep inspiring us for years to come. Either way, it's a reminder of how much we still have to learn about the universe and our place in it.